got there, I was amazed. This was the social revolution.
Everybody say it.
It was a real gathering of the tribe.
Early in the morning. Why don't you all fade away?
The music was new, and it was different than anybody had ever heard or seen before.
The festival was an opening of a door to everybody.
You've got almost the entire population of the West Coast hippie music scene in one little park in Monterey.
If you sat in the audience at that show, you were devastated, man.
When the truth was to be.
We were all very, very high. There was a lot of LSD that weekend.
There were some who were so far gone, they were standing on their heads and dancing.
Monterey Pop Festival changed my life completely.
For 3 days in June 1967, the Monterey Pop Festival showcased groundbreaking musicians, heralded a new age of acid-tripping splendor, and inspired a cultural revolution. This is the story of the weekend when everything changed. This is Monterey 40.
We'd have dancing in the street.
There was a whole confluence to me of things happening at that time. Some were very dark, and some were filled with beautiful light. Vietnam was escalating, it was getting worse and worse.
We really felt like things were changing at a very deep level.
The hippie movement had come out of political confusion, desperation, fantasy, drug-fueled hope and vision.
Somewhere around 1965, this culture sprung up around the Haight-Ashbury that began to have this resonance among young people all across the world.
It was almost like coming out of the Dark Ages, the 50s, like I grew up in, into the Renaissance.
All of this music was so liberating because it was the fuel for the idealism.
One pill makes you larger, and one pill makes you small, and the ones that mother gives you don't do anything at all.
The psychedelic scene in San Francisco was blossoming. There were a number of bands who moved into the area, ourselves, Quicksilver, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Jefferson Airplane, and a bunch more. It was just a real hotbed of artistic activity.
People call them the flower children and the love generation, and they laugh at the hippies. And the hippies laugh at the people.
They played music. They had all the dope they could smoke, all the women that they could be with. That was everything they needed. Their lives were complete.
But down in L.A., the record industry was cashing in on the counterculture. Bands like the Buffalo Springfield, the Byrds, and the Mamas and the Papas were Hollywood hitmakers.
That's where the record deals were being made. That's where records were being recorded, the ones that were actually selling.
At the center of Hollywood's pop music zeitgeist was producer and Mamas and Papas manager Lou Adler.
Whether it's Johnny Rivers, Mamas and Papas, or the Jan and Dean records, or the Sam Cooke songs, there was always an element of taste to his records.
The subject came up of, rock and roll. Everybody thinks about it as a fad, a trend, when in fact it should be validated as an art form in the way that jazz is.
Adler, along with Mamas and Papas frontman John Phillips, had a unifying vision to gather all of rock's emerging artists and showcase them on one stage.
They'd have jazz festivals. Certainly folk music had their own festivals. Why shouldn't rock be treated the same way?
In April 1967, Adler and Phillips set out to turn their radical idea into reality. The first International Pop Music Festival would be held 100 miles south of San Francisco, in Monterey, California.
We all kicked in some seed money to fund the thing, and they got some offices, you know, and that's how it all started.
One daunting challenge remained: to convince the San Francisco bands to get with the program.
The San Francisco groups were all about the music, all about giving it away.
The San Francisco people absolutely hated the Los Angeles people. They thought that everyone in LA had sold out.
Adler and Phillips had a hippie-friendly solution. All proceeds would go to charity.
With musicians giving something back to their audience, it was very important at that time for that to happen. It was sort of the climate, the political climate of the times, and the social climate of the times.
I think that was one of the most important decisions that we made, was let's make it a charity.
The mamas and papas said, why don't you give all the money to charity and we work for nothing? So we said, okay. So Simon and Garfunkel agreed to work for nothing as well. Then everyone followed.
In a matter of weeks, an eclectic bill began taking shape. From Southern soul man Otis Redding, to New York folkies Simon and Garfunkel, to an obscure London-based guitarist named Jimi Hendrix.
There was this feeling that if you didn't participate, you were going to really miss out on something really big.
It really seemed like, oh boy, this is going to be one hell of an event.
We had never all played together before. And we thought, God, this will really put their minds through a ringer. Let's do this.
You have your plane check.
Plane check?
For your clothes.
For your luggage.
All your luggage?
I don't know. Yeah, you got claim checks?
When we showed up at the fairground, there were crews there literally from all over the world. That was the first feel that we had that it was happening, and it was big.
We had an ABC TV special that gave us $500,000 to do a TV special of it. And then D.A. Pennybaker was the one who was in charge of all the filming and all that.
I didn't know what a music film would be. I had no idea. This was a constant agony of thinking, these cameras are going to up, and it's going to be a disaster.
The lineup was in flux to the very last second. I mean, nobody knew who was going to show up.
Hey, Michelle, take this till Dionne Warwick comes on me.
We were going strictly by instinct. John was shooting from the hip. I had no idea how this festival was going to turn out.
Well, this is John Phillips of the Mamas and Papas.
Thousands of people are in Monterey for the festival. No one knows for sure how many thousands, but predictions have run as high as 200,000. Police are worried about the use of narcotics.
If we do get 50, 55,000 people, we're going to have a lot of problems.
Southern California was a bunch of greasers, lowriders, where I was coming from. But then I'd come up to San Francisco with some friends, and I went to Haight-Ashbury district, and I became a stone hippie. And said, well, we want to buy some acid and some weed, because we're going to go down to Monterey Pop.
We're going to open the doors at 12:45, so let's please be ready.
Walking through the gate really was like a doorway into something else, and turned into this wonderland of rock and roll and alternative culture.
Yeah, we'll be right inside.
Okay.
Thank you.
We really didn't know what to expect. And walking into it, to this day, I just remember it as a swirl of color and noise and humanity and smells, patchouli and cowbells, buffalo bells, elephant bells, noises never heard before. And that was before the music even started.
Once you leave, gang, you may not re-enter. But you won't want to leave.
Monterey is very groovy, man. This is something, man. This is our generation, man. All you people, we're all together, man. It's groovy. And dig yourselves, because it's really groovy.
The Monterey International Pop Festival was officially underway. Ironically, the first band on stage was a decidedly non-psychedelic LA group, The Association.
Every time I think that I'm the only one who's only someone calls on me.
Those things that were really popish didn't quite work. In The Association, that's what, San Francisco and Pete Townsend and Jimmy were all rebelling against.
Instead, the countercultural tone was set by the colorful crowd.
I remember looking at the crowd. You just felt the change was in the air.
It was not like anything that anybody had ever seen before.
I saw all these young people, and I suddenly sensed that there was a kind of a hunger in them collectively and individually.
Everybody's so high and dancing and naked, putting things in your hair and passing joints around and exchanging drugs,
I do remember that first day walking down the fairway, and all of a sudden, here's Brian Jones. Brian Jones. That was mind-blowing.
I was like a stalker. We saw him, wow, there's Brian Jones. And we just kind of hung everywhere he was. We were just kind of vibe-sucking.
Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Burton and the Animals.
Nearly every artist who played at Monterey embraced the new psychedelic age. Former Animals frontman Eric Burden was among the converts.
People walking by, dressed in their colorful clothes. I see them strolling by, my happiness flows.
I always had a lot of admiration for Eric Burden as coming out of the school of British blues purists. When he got to Monterey, he went so far in the other direction that it was funny. He bought into the myth of what Monterey represented, the counterculture, the joys of LSD, the wonders of the psychedelic world, more completely and more earnestly and more naively, I think, than anybody else.
I did.
Burden's acid rock rebirth reflected a staggering generational shift.
There is an informed estimate that 1 million American teenagers use drugs. The best-known brand in San Francisco is called Owsley Acid, named after Augustus Owsley Stanley, nicknamed the Acid King.
Owsley was all over the backstage scene. He was the Grateful Dead sound man, among other things. And the guy made the best LSD of the day and manufactured the most enormous amounts of it.
Owsley brought his potent batch of acid to Monterey, and he handed it out like candy, both on stage and off.
He called it Monterey Purple.
I don't remember what color it was, to be honest.
Owsley was feeding all of us a steady supply.
My cousin, who was running one of the crews, came to us and said they're dancing with their brooms. You got to do something about this.
You take a look at the Country Joes and the Quicksilvers and Hendrix, certainly, and Eric Burden, and you can go down the list and go, yep.
I've been loving you too long.
There was a great sense of love around. Everybody kind of loved everybody else.
To stop now.
We're just sitting there on the ground, and some girl comes up and starts, just hugging me and stuff, And then she just sits down across from me and just starts looking straight in my eyes. So we sat there and looked at each other in the eye for about 2 hours.
I doubt if I could explain to you how good a time I had there, because you didn't see the girl I was there with.
Her name was Dana. We were all flopping in this Grange Hall or whatever it was. And I think, one of the real tricks of the 60s is learning how to have sex in a sleeping bag.
Let's hear it for Big Brother and the Holding Company.
Big Brother was a Bay Area band with a Texas-born singer named Janis Joplin. They were virtual unknowns to the Monterey crowd. Former Columbia Records chief Clive Davis was in the audience that day.
We all knew who Clive Davis was, and we all knew Columbia Records was the desirable destination that we all wanted to get to.
Of course, out came Janis,
Down by my window, just looking out at Monterey.
From the beginning, worked up and vibrating and shaking and strutting from one side of the stage to the other in a manner that I had never seen before.
Most people had never seen Janis Joplin, and she was wild and crazy and drinking her wild turkey or whatever it was she drank on stage, and she was shocking and great.
And it felt like a ball and chain. When all right, here it comes to lead time, yeah. And all said, oh, whoa, whoa, honey, oh, this can't be. When on this can't be thing. I said, no.
But Joplin's electrifying performance almost didn't happen. Big Brother's idealistic manager initially refused to allow the band to be filmed.
There was a tremendous amount of distrust and suspicion of the Hollywood contingent, and the band's manager insisted that the cameras be pointed to the ground.
We came to play for free, we're going to play for free, and that's it.
But the singer wanted the cameras to roll.
She yelled, she screamed, she cried, she threw the tantrum of all tantrums.
So we signed the release and performed a second time.
She put that festival in her pocket and walked off with it.
I knew that I had to sign that artist. The times were indeed changing.
Like, you kind of have to wait for a new wave to come, and then a whole new set of rock and roll bands comes along with it.
The Saturday afternoon concert definitely announced the future of the music, and that was the experimental, progressive rock, the underground rock thing with Quicksilver, Steve Miller, Country Joe.
You could feel the electricity, that there was really something going on here.
The Monterey Pop Festival, I think, more than anything, sort of legitimized the San Francisco music scene, or the San Francisco sound, to a great degree.
I was surrounded by this, what I thought was just unbelievably extraordinary music, you know, and it all frightened me in a way, because it seemed to me to be like a tidal wave. I felt engulfed by it. I couldn't keep up with it.
You have to clean all these seats?
Yes.
All of them? You live around here?
No. I came in this morning from Champaign, Illinois.
How come you have to do this? You a friend of somebody's?
Not really. Guess we just happen to be lucky, I guess.
They are the gentle hippies. Their motto, music, love, and flowers. 100 extra police are on the alert, but relaxed.
One of my main impressions of the motorcycle officers with the flowers in their helmets. That was amazing. You know, that really was amazing.
Lou is talking to one of the policemen, and then he kind of playfully kind of hits him, and you can see the camaraderie that was built between the establishment and anti-establishment.
As the mass consumption of Monterey Purple continued, some revelers needed help to get through their acid trips. Concerned hippies Lisa and Tom Law created the first ever Bad Trip Tent.
If someone was having a hard time or flipping out, not enjoying themselves, we'd bring them in and sit them down. They would immediately chill out and maybe spend a few minutes, maybe spend a few hours, and then go on out and have a good time.
Oh, yeah, teepee. A bad trip teepee. That's a good one. A bad trip teepee. I think every concert hall should have a bad trip teepee.
Jimi Hendrix spent about 4 hours in there smoking hash with me. Am I supposed to say that?
Midway through the festival, Monterey Pop was already an historic musical gathering of international artists. And when they weren't performing, they were hanging out in a cavernous space below the stage.
So you get the Grateful Dead, and you get Country Joe or whoever, and Ravi Shankar and Janis, and everybody just intermingling and interchanging and talking about, you know, I love the fourth cut on your record, that kind of stuff, or just getting loaded.
After their sets, musicians jumped backstage for impromptu jams, where a little-known guitar prodigy was at the center of the musical storm.
This black kid with curly hair and a headband came and was looking for a place to plug in. I said, well, you know, use the B channel there. The jam just went on and on endlessly, and finally this black kid, who turned out to be Jimi Hendrix, we were climbing around on the amplifier, feeding our guitars back and stuff like that. It took down the hearing in my left ear to this day. But we had a lot of fun.
I remember going in there, and Jimi Hendrix was playing guitar, and I sat down and played drums for a while. Someone just put a tab of acid in his mouth, and he just opened his mouth and took acid. Like, you know, let someone just put that in his mouth like that.
When the Jefferson airplane took flight on Saturday evening, they were already the undisputed kings of the San Francisco scene.
Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love?
No question, the Jefferson Airplane was the act. Everybody came to see that weekend. They had 2 hit records that year. Somebody to Love and White Rabbit was just blowing up on them.
We didn't think of ourselves that way. I sort of thought about myself as a screw-off. We weren't thinking about careers as much as just doing whatever it is we did as best we possibly could and having a good time while doing it.
Grace Slick at that time was stunning.
She was mesmerizing. You could watch her, and you did go down the rabbit hole with her.
Slick's alluring good looks even distracted the cameraman. He focused on her, even though Marty Ballin was the one singing.
You're making me say that I somehow have changed.
We were all fixated on Grace for a while, weren't we? She was mouthing the words, which was the problem for the cameraman, and Marty has a pretty high voice anyway.
I'm just not the same to be any more than all I would be alive.
I was just sort of singing along, but I wasn't mic'd, and nobody knew the voices at the time.
Most exciting act on the festival program. Running late Saturday night, show's over, audiences on their feet, leaving the arena, flowing out the arena.
Let's bring on with a big hand, Mr. Otis Redding.
This is the love crowd, right? We all love each other, don't we? Am I right? Let me hear you say yeah now.
Otis comes on, and he tells the band double time shake. So instead of just doing it dun, 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 they go dun, 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 dun. And he hits that crowd so hard, they stop and turn around and go back to their seats.
Listen while I talk to you now. I'll tell you what I'm gonna do now. Got a new thing going right here.
A veteran of the Southern Chitlin circuit, Otis Redding was a familiar sight to R&B fans. But to white audiences, the Georgia-born singer was a revelation.
Otis Redding, unbelievable. First time any of us little white kiddies had ever seen him live. Ooh, boy. Was that a lesson?
He wore a suit and he did all the stuff. And I suppose they expected it not to fit the psychedelic thing, but it did. It fit the mood because it was a hippie act.
I was stupefied. I was very used to, kind of the laid-back San Francisco bands. All of a sudden, there's Otis, going, so this is the love crowd, huh? With a band that just blew away every other band.
That turned out to be the absolutely perfect choice for that Saturday night performance, and it not only gave the festival what they needed, it launched Otis Redding as the next soul superstar.
As the mist rolled in on Sunday afternoon, the spiritual sitar of Ravi Shankar filled the festival grounds.
What I wanted to do was get all the great talent from around the world that had never been seen before, and so here you are.
There was already a reverence for Ravi Shankar. He had been introduced to the United States through the Beatles, and George Harrison particularly.
I happened to be with all these Hell's Angels, and we were all kind of hunkered down in the rain listening to Ravi Shankar. But what a great vibe, you know.
I give out my soul to the audience.
Later in the day, a mod band from England was worried about making a good impression. The Who was virtually unknown in the U.S., and guitarist Pete Townsend was feeling uneasy about the band's place in the hippie revolution.
I didn't even think that we would make a mark at Monterey. I thought we were lost. I couldn't work out, where we were going with all this. My generation, it was a song about mods in West London. It was about immigrants, Irish boys, who had no money. It wasn't about California. How was it going to work?
Townsend also fretted about The Who's placement on the bill. He'd seen Jimi Hendrix in London and had no interest in following the guitar sensation's outrageous act.
I just said to him, Jimmy, I've spent 4 weeks with Eric Clapton following you around London and coming backstage and getting down and kissing your feet. Do you really think that I'm going to let you go on first? I can't do it.
It came down to the flip of a coin. I mean, we've worked together on the same bills before, but, The Who knew it was, they wanted to make a good impression, as we did. Who gives a monkeys who goes first? Just make it hard for the next person, really.
I tossed, Jimmy lost. So Jimmy followed The Who, which is what I wanted.
This is where it all ends.
People try to put us down. Just because we
The Who were about fury, about evoking and expressing this incredible aggressive drawing.
Why don't you all fade away?
We hadn't seen a high-energy band like that. And we certainly never seen anybody as outrageous as them.
It took me a while to understand that this was theater. This was rock theater. I had not been exposed to it before.
It was pandemonium. People were genuinely shocked and frightened by what was going on stage.
Never seen anybody, destroy their equipment at the end of the... What the heck was that about?
Smoke bombs went off. Microphones were being hurled. Stagehands were coming out from the wings trying to rescue microphones.
The neck of Pete Townsend's Telecaster came flying over my direction. One of their roadies came over and said, "We need to get that back. We put them back together."
I could hear the sound, the noise from the stage. As I turned the corner, Keith Moon stands up and goes, "Ah!" and throws his drum kit down as a half a stick of dynamite or M80s or something explode in a flash and a boom as Pete Townsend is doing his amplifier with the guitar. I didn't know who the Who were. I didn't know they did this every night. I think, my God, there's a riot going on.
I gotta get down to this.
Prettiest performer, the most exciting guitarist I've ever heard. The Jimi Hendrix Experience.
During the course of the festival, other acts would refer to this guy, Jimi Hendrix. None of us knew anything about him. None of us had ever heard his music. Nobody knew who he was.
It's our first gig, so it meant a lot to all of us. I mean, I can't imagine for Jimmy, like, going back to America, headlining.
It was strange guitar playing. Then I saw him actually do it, left-handed and everything, you know. I never saw a guitar player that played like that guitar was just part of it.
There's some hoochie-coochie mojo going on here. There's my black cat Bone is going to put a spell on you. And he was definitely up to something.
I remember people running around the aisles, just screaming, like so excited.
What is he doing? How could he be pretending to be his instrument?
He's down on the stage, almost having sex with a guitar, and all the musicians are standing on the side going, damn.
I don't think any of us knew that he was going to set his guitar on fire.
Look out in the wings, and Hendrix. Hello, we're going to follow this act. Are we following this act?
At 10 o'clock Sunday evening, the Mamas and the Papas followed Jimi Hendrix onto the stage. Closing out the show was a fitting honor for festival organizer John Phillips and his bandmates, but it might as well have been a death sentence.
Jimi Hendrix picked you.
Groups like The Who were just beginning, and Hendrix was just beginning, We were just ending, and we knew that,
They didn't play badly, but they weren't at the height of their game, put it that way.
We didn't have time to rehearse. We had not sung together in 3 months. I did very much feel that the end of the group was near. I just didn't know how near.
People that went into that weekend, kings and queens, came out without their thrones. And people that went in unknown came out the newly crowned heads of state.
I'm so proud of the fact that we were there, that we spent so much time putting it together. If we didn't do a fabulous performance, so be it.
After 3 days, 31 bands, and countless hours of music and partying, Monterey Pop was finally over. Amazingly, there were no arrests, deaths, or overdoses.
This audience was smoking weed and taking LSD. They're peaceful, they're at ease, they're enjoying themselves.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear.
With all the anticipation about it and what would happen, because this was during the Vietnam War and there were protests going on everywhere and stuff, was that it actually went off without a hitch.
The record industry moved quickly to cash in.
There was probably more great talent introduced at that festival than any other event in history.
I said, there's a revolution going on here. I'm going to quietly build it. I'm going to delve right into it.
Columbia Chief Clive Davis, who had been so moved by Janis Joplin's performance, was determined to sign her. He flew her to New York. But Janis turned the tables on the buttoned-up exec. She said she'd sign if he slept with her.
She said, this is the biggest moment of my life. So to think that I'm going to pick up a pen and that will be it is not significant. So I said, what do you have in mind? And whether she used the F word or whether she just said, let's go to bed together, she was dead serious.
She loved to do her little magic on men, and I can just see her with Clive Davis saying, well, if you take your clothes off, I might sign with your label. That's very Janis.
Going to say
In the weeks after Monterey, the Summer of Love became a cultural phenomenon, and its top 40 anthem inspired a mass migration to San Francisco.
If you go to San Francisco, Wear Flowers in Your Hair was a huge commercial success internationally. Huge. Those San Francisco people can say what they want, but it brought in a lot of tourism.
There was so much San Francisco Summer of Love, flower children just billowing up in the culture. The fact that there was a record on the top 40 radio just made sense. Why not? There's dopey articles in Life, and CBS News is on this, and we've got the tourist buses going up and down Haight-Ashbury.
We are going to leave Golden Gate Park to go into the Haight-Ashbury district.
When the media found us, that was basically the end of it. It couldn't continue to happen.
Summertime will be a loving there.
In spite of its groundbreaking success, the Monterey Pop Festival wasn't quite ready for primetime television.
Penny Baker, somewhere along the way, said, "This is a great film. You know, we've got a real documentary here. We shouldn't waste it on television."
When they went to show the footage to ABC, they went out of their way to show them the most provocative footage.
We didn't show him the association. We chose to show him Hendrix fornicating with his amp and his guitar. And he said, "Not on my network."
The film then became like a fish that got unhooked. It was flopping around and nobody quite knew what to do with it. So we quickly arranged to release it theatrically, which is what, from the beginning, I thought should happen. I didn't think it was a TV show to begin with.
When the movie came out, it took this incredible performance of Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and gave it to the rest of the world. And overnight, they were stars.
The festival garnered worldwide attention and spawned large-scale rock events around the globe. But there would be no sequel in Monterey.
It was that little magical moment that could not be recreated. It was just something so in that moment.
I didn't think we could duplicate what we had done. We were lucky the first time around, and we weren't going to be lucky the next time around.
The counterculture scene in this country went on the rocks and became a disaster area after Monterey. When we went from smoking pot and taking psychedelics occasionally to doing cocaine and heroin, it destroyed our little hippie ideals and flower child ethic and all that silly, pretty stuff. And there were a number of other things that affected that change. Not just one Kennedy, but two Kennedys and a King. These are guys that we believed in. And, you know, nobody that we thought we could believe in lived long enough to do anything.
Now it's on to Chicago and let's win there.
And then in our own community with the Manson slayings of our very, very good friends in August of 1969. And I have to tell you that that was the end of a certain era. It was the end it just didn't seem that any of those good times survived and that they were going to happen again.
So there's a tragic part of Monterey because those things stand out as you start going through, you know, he's not here, she's not here. And Hendrix and Joplin jump out at you, you know, Otis, and that's an enormous impact on what could have been, who could have been here now and who could have been making music now.
was one of the turns of the wheel. I mean, it's part of the fabric of the history of America now.
I got goosebumps in my arms because I was there and I saw it, and it changed my life too.
It's great that after 40 years, it's so meaningful today, and it just refreshes your memory about what an important event it was and what a beautiful event it was. And you don't catch me crying every day.
Be sure to wear some flowers in your hair if you're going to San Francisco.